He's already been picked up, the school's secretary told me, checking her screen twice like she wanted to be wrong. I stood at the front desk in my work blazer, badge still clipped to my collar, and said, "That's not possible. I'm his mother. I'm standing right here." "Someone named Kayla Reyes signed him out 20 minutes ago," she said. "She's listed as an authorized contact. Added 3 weeks ago." I'd never heard that name in my life. My husband, Brian, had told me that morning not to bother picking up our son Jack, that he'd handle it, since I usually worked full days on Thursdays. I only came because my meeting got canceled and I had a rare half-day off. If it hadn't, I might never have found out who Kayla Reyes really was, or how long she'd already been part of my son's life. Welcome to Revenge Stories Narrated, where family betrayal meets inevitable justice and karma always collects its debt. My name is Megan Turner. I'm 35. Brian and I had been married for 8 years with a 6-year-old son, Jack, who loved dinosaurs and hated the color green on his plate for reasons neither of us ever fully understood. I worked as a regional sales manager, which meant long hours most days and travel 2 weeks out of every month. Brian worked from home doing freelance graphic design, and for years that arrangement worked well. He handled school pickups, doctor visits, the small daily logistics of raising a 6-year-old. I handled the mortgage and Jack's college fund, and most of the household bills. It felt fair to both of us, or at least I believed it did. I didn't know, standing at that front desk, that Brian had spent the last 3 months quietly building a case that I was an absent, unreliable mother, using my own work travel as proof, while at the same time introducing a woman named Kayla into our son's daily life, without telling me she existed. It started small enough that I never noticed the pattern. 4 months earlier, Brian mentioned, almost casually over dinner, that he'd hired a sitter for the 2 afternoons a week Jack had early dismissal, since his freelance deadlines had gotten heavier that season. I said that sounded reasonable. I never asked her name. I never met her. I trusted him, the same way I'd trusted him for 8 years of marriage. 2 months after that, during a work trip to Denver, Brian sent me a photo of Jack at a pumpkin patch, smiling next to a woman I assumed was a neighbor or a friend of his mother's. "Sitter took him out for some fresh air," the caption said. I liked the photo and moved on with my day, 31 emails deep into a trip I could barely keep track of. I lost pieces of my son's daily life, without realizing it during those months, small things that add up. I missed the day he lost his first tooth, since Brian told me about it over dinner 2 days later, almost as an afterthought. I missed a school assembly where Jack sang a solo, since Brian said he'd forgotten to tell me the date until it had already passed. I missed his very first soccer goal too, something I only found out about from a group photo another parent posted online, one where I noticed, for the first time, that same woman standing at the edge of the field, clapping like she belonged there. Each time, it felt like an accident. None of it was. 3 weeks before that Thursday at the front desk, Brian added Kayla Reyes to Jack's official school pickup list, using a signed authorization form that, I later learned, required only one parent's signature to file. If you've ever had someone quietly rewrite your role in your own child's life without telling you, tell me in the comments, because I want to know I'm not the only one who's lived through that. I didn't scream at the front desk. I thanked the secretary, walked back out to my car, and sat there for 11 minutes before I could make myself start the engine. Then I drove straight to Brian's favorite coffee shop, the one 3 blocks from our house, because something told me that's exactly where he'd be. He was there, at a corner table, laptop open, sitting across from a woman I now recognized from the pumpkin patch photo. Jack was between them, coloring on a napkin, completely unaware that his mother was standing 10 feet away. "Megan," Brian said, standing up too fast, knocking his coffee cup sideways. "This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like you let a stranger pick up our son from school," I said. "So tell me what it actually is instead." He didn't have an answer ready. "Kayla did, though." "I've been in Jack's life for months," she said, like that was something to be proud of. "Brian and I have been planning things out." I took Jack home that day and didn't say another word to Brian until Jack was asleep, safely, upstairs, still coloring dinosaurs on scrap paper before bed like nothing in his world had shifted at all. That night, I found out exactly what planning things out meant. Brian had been quietly consulting a lawyer for 2 months, building a file that documented every work trip I'd taken that year, every late pickup, every missed school event, all of it true, all of it carefully stripped of context, framed as evidence that I was an inconsistent parent while he positioned himself, with Kayla's help, as Jack's stable, ever-present caregiver. I called a lawyer myself the next morning, a woman named Patricia Alvarez who specialized in family law and had a reputation in our county for being unshakable in court. He added an unrelated adult to your son's official pickup authorization without your knowledge or consent, Patricia told me, reading through the copy of the form the school had given me. In this state, that alone raises real questions about his judgment, especially paired with an undisclosed relationship he never told the school about either. He's going to say I was never around, I said. He's got months of documentation, real dates, real trips. Then we're going to need our own, Patricia said. Starting with exactly how long Kayla's actually had access to your son, and whether the school followed its own procedures when they let him at her, without checking with you first. It took Patricia's office 9 days to get the full pickup log from the school under a records request. Kayla Reyes had picked Jack up 11 times over 3 months, several of those on afternoons Brian had told me he was handling a big project deadline and needed the house quiet. It was during that same week that I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. Brian's phone was charging on the kitchen counter, and a text from Kayla lit up the screen where I could see it clearly. Once the custody stuff is settled and we move to Denver, none of this will matter anymore. I stood there reading it twice, understanding for the first time that this wasn't just an affair. It was a plan to relocate my son out of state quietly before I even knew there was a plan at all. I didn't confront him that week either. I let Patricia keep building the file quietly, while I kept showing up early to every pickup, every event, every appointment I could possibly attend, making sure the next 3 months of my life left no room for Brian's version of the story to hold up in front of anyone. 6 weeks later, Brian sat me down and told me he wanted to formalize things, suggesting a custody arrangement that gave him primary care of Jack, citing my travel schedule and, carefully, never once mentioning Kayla by name. I've been documenting some concerns, he said, sliding a folder across the table. I know exactly what you've documented, I said, sliding my own folder back. And I know exactly how long Kayla's been picking up our son without my knowledge. His face changed the way a person's does when they realize the ground they've been standing on isn't solid anymore. The custody hearing happened 2 months after that. Patricia laid out the full pickup log, the school authorization form filed without my signature, and the text about relocating Jack to Denver before any custody agreement was even filed. The judge was not sympathetic to a parent who had attempted to quietly build a relocation plan around a child without the other parent's knowledge, while simultaneously trying to use that same parent's job to argue she was the less reliable one. I was granted primary custody. Brian was granted standard visitation, and the court specifically noted that any future relocation request involving Jack would require formal approval, given the history laid out in the file. The same plan Brian built to remove me quietly from decisions about our son ended up being the exact reason the court decided he couldn't be trusted to make those decisions alone anymore. Kayla's job situation fell apart around the same time, once it came out during the proceedings that she'd been signing legal school documents under a false description of her relationship to Jack. The daycare network she worked for as a coordinator reviewed her file after the court records became part of a background check for an unrelated job she applied for months later and let her go over the discrepancy. I kept the house. I rearranged my travel schedule with my company, trading 2 of my regional trips for a colleague's local accounts, and I've made every single pickup since, rain or shine, since Jack started keeping a little chart on our fridge marking the days I'm there with a small green sticker, the same green he used to refuse on his dinner plate. I keep every napkin drawing now, too, in a drawer in the kitchen, since I never want to miss another piece of him again. Brian sees Jack every other weekend. He moved into a smaller apartment closer to his mother, still in state, since the relocation plan never happened the way he and Kayla intended it to. Some weekends Jack comes home talking about missing me, and I let him say it without correcting him, since some feelings don't need managing, just listening to. I only picked Jack up that Thursday because a meeting got canceled and I had a rare half day off. If it hadn't, I don't know how much longer it would have taken me to find out how far Brian had already gone, and how close I'd come to losing the everyday version of my son's life, without ever knowing it was slipping away. If you've ever had to quietly gather the truth instead of confronting it head-on right away, you already know it works better that way. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, and tell me down below what you would have done standing at that front desk.